Hello and welcome back to another edition of Wellness with Will. My name is William, last name Lehong, so good to have you on. Our guest today, very special, is Lerato Solomon, who is the founder of Mental Matters, and she joins us today to talk about and continue elevating the conversation about you becoming a mental health advocate. Lerato, welcome to Wellness with Will. Let's start the conversation right there. There are so many touch points when we talk about activism as mental health practitioners, activists, advocates, if you will. But for you specifically, when you are running Mental Matters, what does the advocacy then call for you in that space?
So I think for me, one of the biggest things, I come from not a medical background, but from a lived experience.
Right.
I've had a lived experience and I still live with a chronic mental illness. And that for me was, I needed to do something about it. I needed, because I had first-hand experience with that, and I felt that, I don't want to be the only one who, because I've gotten the help, and I have more understanding of what it entails, and I just felt like, look, the world needs to hear about this, and we all need to, put in the collective effort, to continue fighting, against the stigma, mental health stigma. But I think the role for me deeply entails that I'm just a champion for dignity and just humanity for people. I think that's one of the aspects that we forget, mental health, when we talk about humanity and people's dignity. And it's something that I feel needs to be restored, especially in Africa. And of course, because I'm a South African, my focus is really here in South Africa to ensure that each person really, their dignity and humanity is restored, and that is by ensuring they have a great mental health.
Okay, let's talk about that and unpack it even further, Lerato. Your journey, right, when you were diagnosed with the illness, and you'll share what illness it was. Did you have support in your immediate environment, be it family, friends, colleagues, perhaps even the work environment where you work? What was your experience?
And I love that you just mentioned all the circle that we sort of need as people, right? Because I always say it's a multi-sectoral approach when it comes to, mental health interventions. And I was diagnosed with chronic depression at the age of, I think I was in my around 9, 10.
Wow.
So I'm a four-time suicide attempt survivor, and my first one was at the age of 10. And that is when I was also, diagnosed with depression. But at the time, as a parent, you're thinking, what could a 10-year-old possibly be going through in life?
Sure.
How is a 10-year-old stressed?
Right.
So in my immediate family, that wasn't something taken seriously, simply because from a community that we come from, let alone depression as an adult is something that is frowned upon. So can you imagine a child? No, you'll be fine. She's just, she needs attention. Oh no, she's attention seeking. That's what you get.
Right.
So the support wasn't there. And I think that's why my condition sort of escalated as the years went by, because I didn't get any treatment. Up until I was in my 20s and, I was working, and it took, I think, like I just said to you, the fourth suicide attempt for me to actually now start seeking help. And that is when I was admitted at a psychiatric facility and was treated for over 21 days. And for the first time in my life, I was actually like, there are people like me.
Right.
I am not the only person actually going through this.
Sure.
You know, and when I started getting the help and unpacking really what it is that I have gone through, I was then able to go back to my family, you know, to just educate them and just share the journey with them and humanize the experience. I think when we talk about mental health or mental challenges, we sort of neglect the humanity aspect of it, you know, making it relatable to people.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times, especially when someone is suicidal or has gone through suicidal episodes, we tend to treat it as an isolated incident.
Yeah.
And most families, because they're not educated enough and there isn't enough information in as far as our immediate environment to help the families deal with someone who is suicidal in nature, there seems then to be, like, it exacerbates the situation, right? I imagine that's why you tried 4 times, because the environment was conducive to, it lent itself to you, you know, perhaps in your mind you were thinking, I'm not seeing or getting the help that I need. It would be better if I wasn't here anymore, which are common thoughts that happen with a lot of people who are suicidal. And I'm glad you are happy and you are here and you are sharing your story, Lerato, because you're going to save someone else's life, right? Let's talk about the importance of that education and just really bringing our support structures closer so there is an understanding of what goes through the mind of someone who is suicidal, who then becomes or is in a depressive state.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many things obviously for us to look out for.
Right.
But I think that one of the main things I always say to people is you have to start with yourself, educating yourself. So you have to take the initiative to actually say, you know, I would like to learn more about mental health challenges. And it's something I always say to my family, that not every person who has gone through that experience owes another person like a success story. Unfortunately, that's, you know, that's not how life works, because I'm here, I'm comfortable with sharing it.
Sure.
But somebody else next to me might not be comfortable. So I think as Lerato, as Will, you know, we need to take the initiative to actually say, and which I think you are already doing, I mean, with this show, you know, to say, okay, you know, let's get people out here, let's learn. And I think it's like I said, you as yourself first, Lerato, you need to then go out there and, you know, educate yourself. So when I say educate yourself, follow, you know, shows or even like podcasts, you know, books. There are a lot of books out there now. Get yourself involved in community events. I know there are a lot of nonprofits who are doing work around mental health. I know that. And I want to say social media, but then we have to be responsible about it. I do feel that social media sometimes, you know, there is a side that is not so great, because everybody is now just putting stuff out there, but how responsible is it? You know, so you need to then get credible sources where you are sourcing that information out. But I think the best one is actually you and I sitting with our families and actually sharing our stories. And I feel, like I said, a lot of people, when I've come out, they've actually said, I actually sort of have an idea when people talk about mental health challenges, what it is, because I can relate to it. And I'm not saying we should neglect or put aside, you know, what our professional medical health professions are actually doing out there. But I think it's just tying in, you know, that medical profession background, and also just tying in the humanity aspect of it and just making it relatable to a layperson. Right. When you talk about chemical imbalances to somebody who is youth or somebody who's a layperson who does not understand, we need to consider factors such as literacy, the Africa that we live in. So when Lerato is saying, I struggled to wake up for about 3 weeks, I have been struggling to take a shower. Every time I actually want to go to work, I have to call in and make an excuse and say, I am ill. Then somebody can actually say, that's how I've been feeling. Or I saw my brother, he's been in a state like that.
Sure.
You know, so like I said again, it's a collective approach that we sort of have to do when it comes to educating. But yeah, I think it starts with yourself taking the initiative to, you know, like I said, the social media, there's credible, you know, doctors that are actually doing amazing work out there. We've got your SADCs that you can actually follow, and they do all these amazing, you know, webinars every Fridays. You can learn from that.
I appreciate that. And the thing with social media, I know you are probably aware, is that it can push you over the edge, right? Depending on what appears or comes up on your timeline, some things can exacerbate what was a bad situation, and it can easily, very easily turn worse. And we all know, right? When you are in a depressive state, the voices in our heads are so much louder. So we have to use our discretion on social media and ensure that the content that we're consuming helps us get out of the state or that mindset. Let's talk about the treatment, Lerato, that you went through. I imagine, obviously, at the first attempt when you were at the age of 10, it wasn't necessarily what you received in your 20s.
Yeah.
And I imagine now you are managing quite well. Looking at you, you look really well.
Thank you.
Which is the theme of Wellness with Will.
Right?
Let's talk about the treatment that you've received and how you are now living.
Yeah. So I am very grateful, number one, to have access to mental health care.
Sure.
So that's also a very serious issue that we have. And it's a global issue because if you cannot afford medical aid, you're sort of now sitting on the other end where you scramble to actually get the correct treatment. So I'm very grateful to have had, you know, the resources to be put in a facility, you know, where in 21 days or the 3 weeks, I was able to sit down with an occupational therapist, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist. And that is a community, or they make a huge part of my community for my wellness. Okay. You know, I am constantly seeing my psychiatrist and my psychologist. Okay. So I'm treated by my psychiatrist, who's the one that diagnosed me with chronic depression, and they obviously then prescribed the correct or relevant medication for me. The treatment or the medication part of it is also another journey on its own, because sometimes the prescription that they give you sort of doesn't work, and we sort of have to figure out for a couple of months what is going to work. I was fortunate enough that whatever they had prescribed has been working for me throughout. Okay. So I thought it was going to be a short-term thing with my psychiatrist when they prescribed the medication, and unfortunately it wasn't. When they weaned me off, I relapsed. And then we realized this is going to be a chronic thing that I have to take for the rest of my life. Okay. So I am on medication forever.
Right.
I do see a psychologist.
Okay.
So every year I get about 12 sessions with my medical aid to see a psychologist. Okay. So that is like a part of my wellness, non-negotiable for me, because we constantly go through things in life, and I think it's also okay to see somebody even when you feel that you are okay. Right. Even the great moments in life can sort of have an impact. You know, change is, we don't necessarily react sort of like in a negative way to bad changes, but even great change can be like overwhelming, and you know, sort of like trying to adjust in life into those new changes. So I sort of feel like I need that balance. And then I've got my family that is part of my support. Okay. I do have an immediate family, excuse me, that I'm comfortable with. That's also something I have to highlight. Okay. You don't necessarily have to then now go and be with your family when you know that they are not accommodative or accepting of your condition. So you need to find that community for yourself. And fortunately, my mom, you know, my partner, Those are very like supportive. That's my supportive system. They are the ones that would actually tell me that something is off, you know,
Right.
because I tell them, tell me guys if you feel like, you know, I'm sort of going off a tangent, or you
Right.
are seeing some symptoms that you feel like, Lerato, you need to,
don't know
you're
the right
relapsing, you need to go see somebody.
Sure.
And I think that one that I have recently been working on is establishing that support in a workplace.
Okay.
You know, that's a very difficult one because how the workplace you know, space has been designed is to just bring in your best, leave your problems at home, and as Lerato, just come and work.
Right.
And that's something now that, you know, I believe a lot of advocates are also working. We now have advocates advocating for policy changes in the workplace when it comes to mental wellness.
Right.
So that's a relationship. That's something that I'm still working on, where, you know, I have to be vulnerable enough to say, this is my condition. On certain days, I will not be around because I need to go see my psychiatrist. You know, also just being able to disclose and be open and say, allow me to take sick leave even on days when I don't have to be physically unwell, but when I feel that I am not doing okay
Right.
mentally, I will be using my sick leave, which is something that we struggle with, right? Because
Sure.
you feel like for you to take sick leave, it needs to be a physical condition.
And that's why a lot of corporates, particularly in South Africa, have gone with the introduction of wellness or well-being managers or departments within the organizations to ensure that the employees are supported and there is an understanding, or a person or people within the organization that understand how to deal with colleagues from a mental health aspect and stance. So just wrapping up our conversation, Lerato, I then want to find out, in your journey, are you meeting other young people that you're working with? You mentioned mental matters.
Correct.
What do you tell them when they say, I too have attempted taking my life several times, but I am still here, which means there is hope for me yet? How do you approach those conversations? How do you talk to them? And what sort of feedback have you received?
Yeah. So I think there's like a little quote that I love by Viola Davis, and she said that shame dies in spaces where, you know, you're able to get other people to be vulnerable, right?
Sure.
And I think for me, like when we started our conversation, it was important for me to be here, and as beautiful as I am, and you know, people would look at me and say, oh, she's amazing. I want them to also know that I have gone through the journey, and this is what a person who lives with a chronic mental illness looks like.
Right.
So meaning that there is light on the other side. And for me, opening up a conversation with telling my story is very important, and it's something that I do throughout my engagements, even when a young person comes to me and is telling me what you've said, and I would also go back and tell them, do you know, however many years ago, this is how it started, and this is where I am, you know. And I always encourage that, in as much as maybe you're not comfortable sharing your story and going out and telling the world that this is what I've gone through, but that it's very important to sort of own your story. Like the fact that you have made it on the other side, it's the biggest thing, the greatest thing that you have done for yourself. And if you can just own that story and just say, do not be ashamed that you have gone through this thing, because really it happens to the best of us, to all of us, in fact. You know, I think one thing that people are missing is that there's this notion that, you know, mental illnesses are sort of things that you can get over with willpower, and
Right.
you know, it's just there's a lot of stigma around it, and we know these myths that go around about mental illness. And I think for me, just highlighting to them that it could have been anybody else.
Sure.
You didn't choose to. There's psychological, biological factors and social factors that contribute to mental health challenges. And that's something that people should know. I don't just wake up and choose to say, I want to live with a chronic, depression.
Right.
Yeah, so for me, it's just about owning your story and just being okay. And it does take time, Will, to actually accept.
Sure.
It was hard for me. There's something called treatment fatigue. At some point, you just say, why do I have to live? For my sanity, why do I actually have to live with treatment?
Right.
But then I also realized that it is what keeps me sane. It is what is keeping me here. And it's very important for that. But I think for young people, it's just very important, or anybody else, it's very important to know that you didn't choose it. And that look at the many lives that many people are coming up and actually just, showing that we have overcome this. And
I appreciate that. And you're a young mom as well.
Absolutely.
So I imagine you meet other young moms who have been or are in a similar situation, and you're able to advise them very quickly in 30 seconds. What do you tell them?
Exercise empathy. Very important. So as a leader in my space, as a leader in your space,
right.
I think it's important for us to lead with empathy and live with empathy. One day at a time, honestly. We don't have the answers to everything.
Sure.
But I think that humanity, empathy, kindness, and respect is what will take us far.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Lerato. And you heard it right here on Wellness with Will. Lead with empathy. I know the voice in your head can be so loud, especially if you're suicidal, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, as we've just heard from Lerato Solomon, who founded Mental Matters. That's the episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.